Sophia Jenkins was 32 years old, $40,000 in debt, and smelled like stale coffee and regret. She was invisible to the world, just another waitress in a grease-stained apron at a diner nobody cared about. But on a rainy Tuesday in October, the universe decided to play a game. It started with a rude customer mocking her in a language he thought she didn't understand. It ended with a billionaire sitting 3 feet away, a handwritten note on a napkin, and a plane ticket that would take her from serving pancakes to navigating a conspiracy that threatened to topple a global empire. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the story of how one sentence changed everything. The Blue Plate Diner on the outskirts of Detroit wasn't the kind of place you went to celebrate. It was the kind of place you went to hide. The neon sign out front had been flickering since the Bush administration, buzzing with an angry electric hum that seemed to match the headache currently splitting Sophia Jenkins's skull. It was 11:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, the lull before the lunch rush, and Sophia was scraping dried gum off the underside of table 4. She was tired. Not just didn't sleep well. Tired, but a deep, marrow-level exhaustion that comes from working double shifts for 3 years straight. Sophia, pick up the pace. If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. The voice grated against her ears like tea sandpaper. It was Rick, the manager. Rick was a man who peaked in high school and had been taking it out on the world ever since. He stood behind the counter, arms crossed over a stain on his shirt, watching her struggle. "I'm not leaning, Rick. I'm literally on my knees, scrubbing gum," Sophia said, not bothering to look up. "Don't give me attitude, Jenkins, or you can take that attitude to the unemployment line. I've got 3 resumes in the back office waiting for your spot." He didn't, and she knew it. Nobody wanted to work at the Blue Plate, but Sophia didn't have a choice. The medical bills for her younger brother, Toby, were piling up on her kitchen counter like snowdrifts. Toby had been in a car accident 6 months ago, hit and run. He needed physical therapy, surgeries, and care that her basic insurance laughed at. Every dollar Sophia made went to the Keep Toby Walking Fund. She stood up, wiping her hands on her apron, her back popping audibly. She was a ghost of the woman she used to be. 5 years ago, Sophia wasn't scrubbing gum. She was a scholarship student at the Sorbonne in Paris, studying linguistics and international relations. She had walked the banks of the Seine, debated philosophy in cafes, and dreamed of working for the UN. Then her parents died. A house fire, a faulty wire. Just like that, the dream imploded. She came home to bury them, took custody of 16-year-old Toby, and the tuition money turned into funeral costs and rent. Her fluency in French, Italian, and German became useless party tricks in a town where the only language spoken was struggle. The diner door chimed. A gust of cold wind blew in, carrying dead leaves and the scent of imminent rain. Sophia looked up, expecting a trucker or a local regular. Instead, a man walked in who looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a GQ photo shoot. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Sophia's car. He had slicked back hair, expensive sunglasses, indoors, and an air of entitlement so thick it practically choked the room. He didn't wait to be seated. He walked straight to booth 2, the best seat in the house, and sat down, immediately pulling out a sleek smartphone. "Coffee," he barked without looking at Sophia as she approached. "Black, and don't burn it." "Coming right up," Sophia said, forcing the customer service smile that felt like a mask glued to her face. As she turned to leave, she noticed another man entering. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s. He wore a worn-out tweed jacket, scuffed brown shoes, and carried a beaten-up leather satchel. He looked like a retired history teacher or a librarian down on his luck. He sat quietly at table 5, right next to the rude suit in booth 2. "Just water and toast, please, miss," the old man said gently when Sophia walked by. His eyes were kind, a piercing blue surrounded by wrinkles of laughter and sorrow. "I'll get you some jam on the house," Sophia whispered with a genuine wink. She had a soft spot for the elderly. They reminded her of the grandfather she never got to say goodbye to. Back in the kitchen, Rick was yelling about the cost of napkins, but Sophia tuned him out. She poured the coffee for the suit and plated the toast for the old man. She didn't know it yet, but the distance between booth 2 and table 5, roughly 3 feet, was about to become the most dangerous battleground of her life. Sophia returned to the floor, balancing the tray. The man in the suit, let's call him the snob, was talking loudly on his phone. He was speaking French. Sophia's ears pricked up. It had been years since she'd heard the language spoken live, not just on a Duolingo app she used to keep her skills sharp, but as she got closer to pour his coffee, her nostalgia turned to disgust. He wasn't just speaking French. He was saying horrible things. "Oui, je suis dans ce trou à rats au milieu de nulle part," the snob said, laughing into his phone. "Yes, I'm in this rat hole in the middle of nowhere." Sophia's hand trembled slightly, but she kept pouring. "Les gens ici. Mon Dieu, ils sont répugnants. La serveuse ressemble à un chien mouillé qui a besoin d'être piqué," he continued, glancing up at Sophia with a sneer while he described her to his caller. "The people here, my God, they are repulsive. The waitress looks like a wet dog that needs to be put down." The insult landed like a physical slap. Sophia froze. The pot of coffee hovered over his cup. The old man at the next table, the one in the tweed jacket, looked up from his book. He seemed to sense the tension, though he gave no indication he understood the words. The snob snapped his fingers in front of Sophia's face. "Hey, earth to the cow! You're spilling it!" He hadn't switched back to English for the insult. He assumed she was too stupid to understand anything but a grunt. Something inside Sophia Jenkins snapped. It was the snap of 3 years of repressed grief, the snap of Rick's yelling, the snap of the medical bills, and the snap of being treated like furniture. She set the coffee pot down on the table with a heavy thud. The diner went quiet. Even Rick stopped yelling in the back. Sophia took a deep breath. Her posture changed. The slump of the exhausted waitress vanished, replaced by the rigid, proud spine of the woman who had once finished top of her class in Paris. She looked the snob dead in the eyes. "Monsieur," she began, her voice dropping an octave, slipping into a flawless, aristocratic Parisian dialect, the kind of French taught in the highest halls of academia, sharper and more elegant than his own lazy, slang-filled speech. "Si cet établissement est un trou à rats, c'est seulement parce que des vermines comme vous y ont élu domicile," she said, her voice ringing clear through the diner. "If this establishment is a rat hole, it is only because vermin like you have decided to nest here." The snob dropped his phone. It clattered onto the table, his jaw unhinged. He stared at her, his face flushing a deep, violent crimson. Sophia wasn't done. "Et quant à mon apparence," she continued, leaning in closer, her eyes blazing, "je préfère ressembler à un chien mouillé qui travaille pour sa vie, plutôt qu'à un porc en costume qui vit des mensonges de son père. Votre accent trahit vos origines, monsieur. Nouveau riche. Pas de classe. And as for my appearance, I would rather look like a wet dog working for a living than a pig in a suit living off his father's lies. Your accent betrays your origins, sir. New money. No class." The silence in the diner was absolute. You could hear a pin drop, or, in this case, a piece of toast. The old man at the next table had lowered his toast, his mouth slightly open, staring at Sophia with an intensity that was almost frightening. The snob sputtered. You speak French, Sophia finished for him, switching back to English, her voice flat and cold. And Italian, and German. Now drink your coffee before I pour it in your lap. It's on the house. She turned on her heel and walked away. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was shaking. I'm fired, she thought. Rick is going to kill me. I'm going to lose the apartment. Toby is going to lose his therapy. She marched behind the counter, bracing herself for Rick's explosion, but Rick was just staring at her, mouth agape. He didn't know what she had said, but he knew he had just watched a lioness eat a gazelle. In booth 2, the snob scrambled to grab his phone and threw a $20 bill on the table, fleeing the diner as if the seat were on fire. He didn't look back. Sophia leaned against the soda fountain, closing her eyes, trying to stop her hands from trembling. "Miss?" a soft voice called out. Sophia opened her eyes. It was the old man from table 5. He was standing at the counter now. He looked different. Taller, somehow. The slouch of the tired retiree was gone. "I'm sorry about the disturbance, sir," Sophia said, her voice weary. "Did you need a refill?" "No," the man said. He placed a napkin on the counter. "I need you to read this." Alone. "Sir, my name is Alistair Sterling," the man said. He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. The name carried weight, though Sophia couldn't quite place it in her panic-stricken state. "You have a rare gift, Sophia. Not just the language, but the fire. The world is full of people who speak, but very few who have something to say." He placed a heavy metal card on top of the napkin. It wasn't a credit card. It was black titanium. "I have a plane waiting at the private airfield in Pontiac. It leaves in 3 hours. If you are brave enough to walk away from—" He gestured vaguely at the greasy diner. "This. Then meet me there." I can't," Sophia stammered. "My brother. I have a job. Your brother's medical bills will be taken care of. That is a promise," Alistair said. He looked at her with those piercing blue eyes. "But only if you take the leap." He turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Sophia staring at a grease-stained counter, a black metal card, and a napkin scrawled with handwriting that looked suspiciously like coordinates. Rick came rushing up. "Who was that? Did he pay? What did you say to that guy in the suit? Jenkins, you're on thin ice." Sophia looked at Rick. Then she looked at the card. It simply said, "Sterling Archives. Paris, New York, Tokyo." She grabbed the napkin. The note didn't contain coordinates. It contained a single sentence. "The man you just insulted was Luke Bernard, the VP of my competitor. You just did what my entire legal team couldn't do in 6 months. You made him feel small. I need that voice." Sophia looked at the clock. 12:15 p.m. The plane left in less than 3 hours. The Uber ride to the Pontiac airfield cost Sophia her last $40. She sat in the back of the rattling Toyota Camry, clutching a small duffel bag containing her only suit, bought for a funeral, her passport, which she miraculously hadn't let expire, and a photo of Toby. She had called her neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, to watch Toby for 2 days. 2 days, she told herself. If this is a scam, I'll be back in 2 days. If it's real, she didn't let herself finish that thought. When the car pulled up to the private terminal, Sophia felt like she was hallucinating. The airfield wasn't the chaotic mess of Detroit Metro. It was silent, sleek, and lined with machines that looked more like spaceships than airplanes. Standing on the tarmac, next to a Gulfstream GS-50 that gleamed silver in the overcast light, was Alistair Sterling. He was no longer wearing the tweed jacket. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly. Flanking him were two large men who looked like they chewed bricks for breakfast. Sophia stepped out of the Uber. She felt absurdly small. "You came," Alistair said, a small smile playing on his lips. "You said you'd help my brother," Sophia said, her voice shaking but defiant. "That's the only reason I'm here. If this is some kind of sick joke, I swear to God." "No jokes, Sophia," Alistair said. He gestured to the stairs of the jet. "But we have a schedule to keep. We are flying to Monaco." "Monaco?" Sophia choked. "Why?" "Because," Alistair said, as he began to ascend the stairs, "in 24 hours, a merger is taking place that will determine the future of clean energy in Europe. Luc Bernard, the man you decimated at the diner, will be there. He thinks he's negotiating with a senile old man. I need you to be my ears. I need you to listen to what they say when they think I'm not listening." Sophia followed him up the stairs, the soft leather of the jet's interior smelling of wealth and lavender. "But why me? You can hire the best translators in the world." Alistair stopped and turned to her. The cabin door hissed shut, sealing them in. "I have the best translators," Alistair said grimly. "But they are all corporate spies. They translate words, Sophia. They don't translate intent. I watched you today. You heard the insult, you processed the arrogance, and you struck back with precision. I don't need a translator. I need a weapon. And I think you've been sharpening yourself for a long time." As the jet engines roared to life, pushing Sophia back into the plush cream-colored seat, she looked out the window. The grey skyline of Detroit began to shrink. The diner, Rick, the gum under the table, it all faded into a patchwork quilt of concrete and brown grass. She opened the folder Alistair slid across the table to her. Target, Omega Consortium. Primary antagonist, Luc Bernard. Mission, intercept and decode. And underneath, stapled to the file, was a receipt. It was a wire transfer confirmation. Beneficiary, St. Jude's Medical Center. Account, Toby Jenkins. Amount, $250,000 or towers. Paid in full. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. It wasn't a promise. He had already done it. He had paid the debt before she even stepped on the plane. "Why?" she whispered, looking up at Alistair, who was sipping a sparkling water. "Because," Alistair said, looking out at the clouds. "Loyalty is expensive, Sophia, and I just bought yours. Now dry your eyes. We have French verb conjugations to review. Luc Bernard speaks a specific dialect from the south when he's lying. You need to learn to hear it." Sophia wiped her face. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She didn't know what she was. But as the jet broke through the clouds into the blinding sunlight above, she knew one thing. Luc Bernard was going to wish he had just ordered the damn coffee and kept his mouth shut. The flight to Monaco was a blur of briefing documents and espresso. Sophia learned that Alistair Sterling wasn't just a rich old man. He was the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a legacy firm that had been quietly powering half of Europe's grid for decades. But the sharks were circling. The Omega Consortium, led by the slippery Luc Bernard, was trying to force a hostile takeover. They claimed Sterling was out of touch and too old. They were meeting at the Hotel de Paris in Monte Carlo. Neutral ground. Or so it seemed. When they landed in Nice, a helicopter whisked them along the coastline. Sophia had never seen water that blue. It looked fake, but the knot in her stomach was very real. Alistair handed her a small earpiece. "This connects to my hearing aid," he explained. "I will be playing the part of the hard of hearing, slightly confused elder. You will be sitting 3 tables away in the hotel restaurant, posing as a tourist. You will have a directional microphone disguised as a purse. You listen to everything Bernard and his team say to each other." "And if they catch me?" Sophia asked, adjusting the silk scarf Alistair's stylist had given her. She looked unrecognizable. The messy bun was gone, replaced by a sleek blowout. She wore a Chanel dress that cost more than her car. "They won't look at you," Alistair said sadly. "Men like Bernard don't look at women unless they want something from them. To him, you are furniture. Use that." They entered the hotel separately. Sophia took her position in the lobby restaurant, the Le Louis à Firtfirt. It was a palace of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. 10 minutes later, Luc Bernard walked in. He was accompanied by 2 other men, sharks in suits. They sat at a corner table. Alistair Sterling joined them a moment later, walking with a cane he didn't actually need, playing the part of the frail old man perfectly. Sophia adjusted her purse on the table, pointing the clasp toward them. She put her earpiece in, covering it with her hair. The audio crackled to life. "Alistair! So good to see you," Luc Bernard shouted in English, his voice dripping with fake charm. "You look rested." "What?" Alistair shouted back, cupping his ear. "Tested?" Yes, very tested." Luc laughed, glancing at his partners. Then he switched to French, rapid, low, and vicious. "Le vieux est complètement sénile," Luc muttered to the man on his left. "The old man is completely senile. On lui fait signer les droits sur la fusion nucléaire et ensuite on démantèle l'entreprise," the partner replied. "We make him sign the rights to the nuclear fusion, and then we dismantle the company." Sophia's hand tightened around her wine glass. They weren't just taking over. They were going to scrap Alistair's life work. But then, Luc said something that made Sophia's blood run cold. "Est-ce que le virement a été fait au juge à Detroit?" Luc asked. "Was the wire transfer made to the judge in Detroit?" Sophia froze. "Detroit? Oui," the partner replied. "Rick a confirmé. Le dossier de faillite de Sterling est prêt à être déposé dès qu'il signe ici. On gèle ses actifs américains demain matin." Yes, Rick confirmed. Sterling's bankruptcy file is ready to be filed as soon as he signs here. We freeze his American assets tomorrow morning. Rick, the manager at the diner. The pieces slammed together in Sophia's mind like a car crash. Rick wasn't just a bad manager. He was a plant, a low-level spy paid to keep an eye on Alistair Sterling, who frequented that diner because it was the only place he felt anonymous. Rick had been feeding information to Omega for months. And worse, Luc just mentioned a judge. They weren't just attacking the company. They were fabricating a legal case to freeze Alistair's money so he couldn't fight back. Sophia tapped the small microphone on her collar 3 times, the signal for emergency. Alistair at the table coughed loudly. "Water! I need water!" he proclaimed, creating a scene. Sophia knew she had to act, but she couldn't just walk over there. She needed to get a message to Alistair without blowing her cover. She called the waiter over. "Mademoiselle." "I would like to send a bottle of wine to the gentleman at that table," Sophia said in French. "The 45 Petrus." The waiter's eyes widened. That was a $10,000 bottle. "And," Sophia added, pulling out a pen, "I would like to write a note to go with it." She grabbed a coaster. On it, she wrote in bold letters, "Rick is a mole. Detroit assets freeze imminent. Do not sign." She handed the coaster to the waiter. "Make sure the older gentleman gets this. Tell him it's from the wet dog." The waiter, a man named Henri, who had worked at Le Louis XV for 30 years and had seen everything from royal proposals to mafia hits, carried the bottle of Petrus 1945 with the reverence of a priest carrying a holy relic. The bottle was dusty, dark, and worth more than the average car in the parking lot. He approached the table where the future of Sterling Dynamics hung by a thread. Luc Bernard was in the middle of a sentence, his hand gesturing expansively. "And frankly, Alistair, the nursing home facilities in Zurich are top tier. We've already reserved a suite for you." Lakeview. Alistair Sterling sat slumped in his chair, his hand trembling as he reached for his water glass. He looked defeated. He looked 80 years old, going on dead. "Excuse me, monsieur," Henri interrupted softly. Luke looked up, annoyed. "What? We didn't order wine. And certainly not. Is that the 45? Greed flickered in his eyes, instantly replacing the annoyance. "Compliments of the lady at table 9, Henri said, presenting the bottle. He placed the coaster face down in front of Alistair. "And a note for Monsieur Sterling." Luke whipped his head around. He scanned the room. Table 9 was occupied by a striking woman in a navy Chanel dress, her back straight, sipping an espresso. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, but the tilt of her chin was unmistakable. "Who is that?" Luke demanded. "One of your old mistresses, Alistair?" Alistair didn't look at the woman. He looked at the coaster. He flipped it over. "Rick is a mole. Detroit. Assets freeze imminent. Do not sign." The trembling in Alistair's hand stopped instantly. The fog in his eyes cleared, replaced by a glint of cold, hard steel. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the restaurant, truffles, sea salt, and the cheap cologne of the man sitting across from him. "A mistress?" Alistair said, his voice suddenly strong, the deaf old man slur completely gone. "No, Luke. That is my new vice president of international relations." Luke blinked. "What? You're rambling, old man. Sign the papers." Alistair reached into his jacket pocket. Luke smiled, expecting a pen. Instead, Alistair pulled out his hearing aid and set it on the table. "I don't need this," Alistair said clearly. "And I don't need your nursing home in Zurich. But I do think you're going to need a lawyer. A very expensive one." Luke's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Rick," Alistair said. The color drained from Luke's face. It happened slowly, like water receding from a shore. I don't know a Rick." "Rick usually works the Tuesday lunch shift," a voice said from above them. Luke froze. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had dressed him down in Detroit. It was the voice of the waitress. Sophia Jenkins stood by the table. She had removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were burning. "He manages the Blue Plate Diner," Sophia continued, switching flawlessly between English and French. "Il est aussi celui qui vous a envoyé les relevés bancaires personnels de Monsieur Sterling, n'est-ce pas? He is also the one who sent you Mr. Sterling's personal bank statements, isn't he?" Luke stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "You, the waitress. This is a setup. Who are you?" "I'm the wet dog," Sophia said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "And I just bit you." She placed her clutch bag on the table and tapped her phone. A recording played, amplified by the silence of the stunned restaurant. Recording, Luke's voice. "Was the wire transfer made to the judge in Detroit?" Rick confirmed. "Sterling's bankruptcy file is ready." The recording echoed. The diners at nearby tables stopped eating. Luke looked at his two partners. They were backing away, physically distancing themselves from him. Corporate loyalty usually ends where felony indictments begin. "This is illegal recording," Luke hissed, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Inadmissible, you have nothing." "Actually," Alistair said, standing up. He was taller than Luke. Much taller. "We are in Monaco. Single-party consent laws regarding privacy are complicated, especially when investigating corporate espionage involving international wire fraud. But that's for the police to decide. They are waiting in the lobby, by the way." Luke looked at the exit. He looked at Alistair. Then his eyes landed on Sophia. The panic in his face turned into something uglier. Malice. "You think you've won?" Luke sneered, stepping closer to Sophia. You stupid girl. You think Rick is the only leverage I have? You think I didn't run a background check on the waitress who embarrassed me? Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Toby, Luke whispered. The world stopped. He's at the St. Jude's rehab center, isn't he? Luke smiled, pulling out his phone. I have a contact there, an orderly. Owes me gambling debts. If I don't text him a specific code in the next 2 minutes, he's going to ensure your brother has a very unfortunate fall during his physical therapy session. Sophia felt the blood drain from her extremities. She lunged forward, grabbing Luke by the lapels of his suit. If you touch him, she screamed, losing all her composure, I will kill you. Luke laughed, holding the phone up high. Checkmate, Cinderella. Tell the old man to sign the papers. Now. Or Toby breaks his neck. The restaurant was silent. Security was moving in, but they were too far away. Alistair looked ready to strike Luke, but he hesitated. He couldn't risk the boy's life. Sophia stood, trembling, gripping Luke's jacket. She looked at his phone. His thumb was hovering over a messaging app. She had to think. She was a linguist. She studied patterns, codes, and human behavior. Luke was a narcissist. He was arrogant. But he was also a coward. You're lying, Sophia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Am I? Luke sneered. Try me. You're lying because you used the past tense, Sophia said, her mind racing, analyzing his earlier French statements. In the recording, you said Rick confirmed the file. You delegate. You don't do dirty work yourself. You don't know an orderly. You know Rick. She released him and took a step back. Rick is the one who knows where Toby is. Rick is your only connection to my life. Luke's eyes flickered, a micro-expression of doubt. She was right. So, Sophia said, pulling out her own phone. Let's call Rick. Don't! Luke shouted. Sophia hit the speed dial. She didn't call Rick's cell. She called the landline of the Blue Plate diner. It rang once, twice. Blue Plate, this is Rick. The voice grated through the speakerphone. Rick, Sophia said, her voice steady. It's Sophia. Jenkins, where the hell are you? You missed your shift. You're fired. I'm throwing your brother's pictures in the trash right now. Rick, shut up and listen, Sophia commanded. I'm standing next to Luke Bernard. Silence on the line. He's about to be arrested for international wire fraud, Rick. The FBI is raiding his offices in New York as we speak. He just told me he's going to pin it all on you. He said you were the mastermind. He said you blackmailed him. What? Rick screamed. That liar! I have the emails. He paid me $5,000 to hack the diner's Wi-Fi to steal Sterling's passwords. It was his idea. Rick, did you hear that? Sophia asked, looking at Luke. Luke looked like he was going to vomit. I have the emails, Rick continued shouting, panic making him confess everything. I have the receipts. I'm not going to jail for that French prick. Rick, Sophia said soothingly, the police are coming to the diner. If you hand over those emails immediately, I can talk to Mr. Sterling. Maybe they'll go easy on you. I'm printing them now! I'm printing them! Rick yelled, and then the line went dead. Sophia looked at Luke. You were saying something about an orderly? Luke looked at his phone. He realized he had lost. He had no leverage. He had no mole. He had just been outsmarted by a waitress who knew that low-level criminals like Rick always flip when they think they're being framed. The elevator doors pinged open. 3 officers from the Sûreté Publique of Monaco walked in, guided by Alistair's head of security. Monsieur Bernard? The lead officer asked. Luc Bernard didn't fight. He slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume that didn't fit. He let the phone drop to the floor. As they cuffed him and led him away, he stopped and looked at Sophia one last time. Who are you? He asked again. this time with genuine confusion. Sophia smoothed her dress. She picked up the bottle of Petrus 1945. "I'm the woman who just served you," she said. The silence inside the cabin of the Gulfstream G650 was different on the way back. On the flight out, it had been a silence born of tension and the unknown. Now, as the jet cruised at 45,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, the silence was heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Sophia Jenkins sat staring at the condensation forming on the bottom of her crystal champagne flute. She hadn't taken a sip. The bubbles danced and popped, tiny explosions that mirrored the adrenaline still misfiring in her nervous system. She was exhausted. It was a bone-deep weariness, but it wasn't the same crushing fatigue she felt after a double shift at the Blue Plate diner. That was the tiredness of despair. This was the tiredness of a soldier who had survived the front lines. Across the aisle, Alistair Sterling was asleep. The man who controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire, who had just orchestrated the takeover of his greatest rival, looked deceptively fragile, with his mouth slightly open and his hands folded over a blanket. Sophia looked down at her hands. They were manicured, a detail the stylist in Monaco had insisted on. They didn't look like her hands. They didn't look like hands that scraped burnt eggs off a griddle or scrubbed toilets when the janitor called in sick. They looked like the hands of a stranger. "Who am I?" she thought. "I'm a waitress who knows French. That's all I was yesterday. What am I now?" The pilot's voice crackled softly over the intercom, careful not to wake Mr. Sterling. "Miss Jenkins, we'll be beginning our descent into Pontiac in about 45 minutes. The weather in Detroit is raining, 42 degrees. "Thank you," she whispered. Raining. 42 degrees. The glamour of the French Riviera, the golden sunset over the Mediterranean, the smell of sea salt and money. It was all fading. Reality was rushing up to meet her at 500 miles per hour. Alistair stirred. He blinked, adjusting his glasses, and looked at Sophia. He saw the look on her face, the terror of the return. "The re-entry is always the hardest part," Alistair said, his voice raspy from sleep. He sat up and poured himself a glass of water. "Astronauts talk about it. You go to space, you see the Earth as a blue marble, and then you have to come home and pay your taxes and mow the lawn. It feels small. It feels like I imagined it," Sophia said. She turned to him. "Did I imagine it, Alistair? Did I really just threaten a corporate shark with a prison sentence?" "You didn't just threaten him, Sophia. You dismantled him," Alistair corrected gently. "Luc Bernard is currently in the custody of the Monegasque authorities. His board of directors has already reached out to me. They are surrendering. You saved the company." He reached into his leather briefcase, which sat on the empty seat next to him. He pulled out a thick manila envelope. He didn't slide it across the table this time. He held it, weighing it in his hand. "We need to talk about what happens when those wheels touch the tarmac," Alistair said. "I wired the money for Toby's medical bills. That is done. It is yours. You don't owe me a penny." "I know," Sophia said, "and I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Alistair said, "but now you have a choice. You can take that Uber back to your apartment. You can go back to your life. You'll be debt-free. You can go back to school. You can become a teacher, a translator, whatever you wanted to be before the fire took your parents." He paused, watching her reaction. "Or," he continued, placing the envelope on the table, "you can open this." Sophia looked at the envelope. It was thick. "What is it?" "It's a contract," Alistair said, "but it's not for a job. It's for a life." Sophia reached out. Her fingers trembled as she undid the clasp. She pulled out the documents. It was the employment agreement, but the numbers made her dizzy. Role: Director of Strategic Communications and Special Projects Base. Salary: $285,000, and signing bonus, $50,000. Stock options, vesting immediately. Director? Sophia choked out a laugh. Alistair, I serve pancakes. I don't know the first thing about corporate strategy. Sophia, look at me, Alistair said, his tone sharpening. You think strategy is about spreadsheets? You think it's about having an MBA from Harvard? I have a building full of MBAs. They are useless. They think inside the box because the box is all they've ever known. He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. Strategy is about reading people. It's about listening to what isn't being said. You walked into a diner, saw a man speaking a language he thought was a shield, and you dismantled him with a sentence. You walked into a restaurant in Monaco, assessed a hostage situation, realized my enemy was bluffing based on verb tenses, and turned his own henchman against him. Alistair pointed a finger at her. That isn't a skill you learn in business school. That is a survival instinct. You have been surviving for 5 years, Sophia. You've been in the trenches. I don't need another soft-handed executive. I need a fighter. I need someone who knows what it feels like to have everything to lose. Because those are the only people who fight hard enough to win. Sophia looked at the contract again. The salary wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was the best doctors for Toby. It was a house with no stairs. It was a car that started in the winter. I have to take care of Toby, she said, her voice small. I can't be traveling to Europe every week. Read page 4, Alistair said. Sophia flipped the pages. Clause 14. Relocation and family support. The company shall provide full relocation assistance. A private care facility stipend of $10,000 per month will be provided for any immediate family members requiring medical assistance, or the employee may choose to have in-home care provided by the company's private medical network. Sophia put her hand over her mouth. A tear escaped, tracking through the expensive makeup she was still wearing. I did my research, Sophia, Alistair said softly. I know you won't leave him. You don't have to. Bring him with you. We have offices in New York, London, Paris. Show him the world. The plane banked. The lights of Detroit sprawled out below them, a grid of amber and white amidst the darkness. It was the city that had broken her, the city that had trapped her. And now, looking at it from above, it looked beautiful. Because for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't trapped. The Uber ride from the airfield to her apartment was a jarring transition. The luxury of the jet was replaced by the smell of stale cigarette smoke and a check engine light on the dashboard of a Honda Civic. It was 11:00 p.m. when she pulled up to the crumbling duplex she rented. The porch light was out. The bulb had burned out 3 weeks ago, and she hadn't had the money to buy a new one. She paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk with her small duffel bag. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She was still wearing the Chanel dress, shivering in the cold Detroit rain. She felt ridiculous, a Cinderella who had stayed past midnight. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell of the house hit her, old carpet, medicine, and Mrs. Higgins's lavender perfume. Mrs. Higgins was asleep in the armchair, the TV flickering with the late-night news. She woke with a start as the door clicked shut. "Sophia?" the old woman asked, squinting. "My lord, look at you. You look like a movie star." "Hi, Mrs. Higgins," Sophia whispered, dropping her bag. "How is he?" "He's been asking for you," she said, gathering her knitting. "He had a bad night. The pain in his legs was flaring up. I gave him the meds, but he was worried. He saw the news, Sophia." Sophia froze. The news? About the billionaire, Sterling, and the arrest in Monaco. He saw a picture on the internet. He said it looked like you in the background. Sophia walked past her, down the narrow hallway to the back bedroom. She pushed the door open gently. Toby was awake. He was lying in the hospital bed that took up most of the small room. He looked so young, his face pale, his legs encased in braces. He was holding his phone, the screen illuminating his face. "Sophia?" he croaked. "Hey, Tobes," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked at her. He looked at the dress. He looked at her hair. "It was real, wasn't it?" Toby whispered. "You didn't go to a job interview in Chicago." "No," Sophia said. She reached out and took his hand. It was cold. "I went a little further than Chicago." "I saw the video," Toby said, turning his phone. It was a blurry clip from a bystander in the restaurant in Monaco. It showed Sophia standing over Luke Bernard, pointing her finger. You couldn't hear the words, but you could see the power. "You looked scary." Sophia laughed, a wet, choking sound. "I was terrified, Toby. I was so scared I thought I was going to pass out." "You didn't look scared," Toby said. He squeezed her hand. "You looked like Mom." That broke her. Sophia leaned forward, burying her face in her brother's shoulder, and sobbed. She cried for the parents they lost. She cried for the years she spent pretending to be okay. She cried for the gum under the tables, and the rude customers, and the fear. The constant, grinding fear that she wouldn't be able to pay for his medicine. "It's over, Toby," she whispered into his shirt. "It's all over. I paid the bills. All of them. And we're moving." "Moving?" Toby asked, pulling back. "Where?" Sophia sat up, wiping her eyes. She smiled, and for the first time in years the smile reached her eyes. "Wherever we want," she said. "Paris? New York? Maybe somewhere with a beach?" Toby's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I got a new job. A real job." "But what about the diner?" Toby asked. Sophia's expression hardened slightly. "I have one last thing to do at the diner." The next morning, the Blue Plate diner was busy. It was the breakfast rush. The smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee hung in the air like a fog. Rick was behind the counter, sweating. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale and clammy. He was shouting at the new girl, a teenager who looked like she was about to cry. "I said toast, not biscuits. Are you deaf? God, good help is impossible to find." The door chimed. Rick didn't look up. "Sit anywhere. We're understaffed because some people don't show up for their shifts." "I'm not here to sit, Rick." The voice cut through the noise of the diner like a knife. Rick froze. He slowly looked up. Sophia stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her apron. She wasn't wearing the Chanel dress either. She was wearing a sharp, tailored blazer, dark jeans and boots. She looked professional. She looked dangerous. "Jenkins," Rick stammered. He tried to puff out his chest, but it faltered. You have some nerve showing your face here. You missed 2 shifts. You're fired. Get out." "I quit 3 days ago, Rick," Sophia said, walking toward the counter. The diner went quiet. The regulars recognized her, but they didn't recognize this energy. "You can't quit," Rick spat. "I fired you, and don't think you're getting your last paycheck. I'm keeping it for damages." "Keep it," Sophia said calmly. She stopped right in front of him. "You're going to need it for the bail bondsman." Rick's face went grey. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Luke Bernard gave you up, Rick," Sophia said, her voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "The FBI raided his offices in New York yesterday. They found the emails, the ones where you sold Alistair Sterling's private credit card data, the ones where you helped them track his location so they could ambush him." "Lies!" Rick screamed, looking around the diner frantically. "She's crazy! Get her out of here!" "He also told them about the kickbacks," Sophia continued, relentless. "And the blackmail." Outside, the wail of sirens began. It started soft and grew louder, a rising crescendo of justice. Rick's eyes darted to the window. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. "No," Rick whispered. "No, no, no." He tried to run. He actually tried to scramble over the counter, stepping on a plate of scrambled eggs. It was pathetic. The door flew open. "Richard Salyer!" a police officer boomed. Rick slipped on the eggs and crashed to the floor behind the counter. "It wasn't me! It was the girl! She made me do it!" The officer walked around the counter and hauled Rick up by his grease-stained collar. "You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Salyer, and I suggest you use it." As they dragged Rick out in handcuffs, he passed Sophia. He looked at her with hatred, but mostly with fear. "Who are you?" he hissed. "You're just a waitress." Sophia looked at him. She thought about the years of verbal abuse. She thought about him mocking her when she asked for extra shifts to pay for Toby's surgery. "I'm the Director of Strategic Communications for Sterling Dynamics," Sophia said coolly. "And you, Rick, are the lunch special." The door closed behind him. The diner was dead silent. The new girl, the teenager, was staring at Sophia with wide eyes. Sophia walked over to her. She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. It wasn't her business card. It was a contact for a student aid program. "Don't let him or anyone else tell you you're stuck here," Sophia said to the girl. "You're smarter than this place." She turned to leave. She looked at table 4. The gum was probably still there. But it wasn't her problem anymore. 1 week later. The private hangar at Pontiac Airfield was bustling. The ground crew was loading customized medical equipment onto the jet. Toby was already on board, settled into a specially designed reclining seat, wearing a pair of noise-cancelling headphones and grinning like a kid on Christmas. Alistair stood on the tarmac, watching Sophia. She was looking back at the skyline of Detroit one last time. "Regrets?" Alistair asked. "No," Sophia said. She clutched her passport. "Just memories." "We have a meeting in Paris on Tuesday," Alistair said. "The new scholarship fund. The board wants you to present the Jenkins Initiative." "I'm ready," Sophia said. "And after that?" Alistair asked. "The world is big, Sophia." Sophia turned to him. The wind caught her hair. She looked alive. She looked free. "After that," Sophia said, switching to perfect, fluid French. "Après cela, nous verrons. Le monde est un livre, et ceux qui ne voyagent pas n'en lisent qu'une page. After that, we shall see. The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only 1 page." Alistair smiled. St. Augustine, a classic choice. "I have a lot of reading to do," Sophia replied. She turned and walked up the stairs of the jet. She didn't look back at the grey clouds of Michigan. She looked forward, into the cabin where her brother was safe, where her future was waiting, and where her voice, the voice she had found in a diner over a cup of black coffee, would never be silenced again. The jet engines roared to life, a sound not of departure, but of arrival. Sophia Jenkins was finally taking flight. Sophia's story isn't just about luck. It's about preparation meeting opportunity. She spent years mastering a skill nobody thought she needed. And when the moment came, she didn't just speak, she roared. We all have a diner we're stuck in, and we all have a French we're secretly mastering. The question is, when your moment comes, will you be brave enough to speak up? If this story inspired you to keep fighting for your dreams, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel. Share this video with someone who feels stuck in their job right now. It might be the sign they need. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about how ordinary people do extraordinary things. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next chapter.